Hi everyone. Firstly, apologies. It must be getting on for nearly 2 months since I've uploaded a video. I'm so sorry. I was trying to think of excuses, but there are none. I've been a very lazy boy. I started one subject, another vintage kit, and within 5 minutes I'm thinking, what am I doing? I've lost interest already. So I put it to one side, picked this individual up, started him, and even then I was picking at it. I just couldn't get interested at all. A bit like a scab, just picking at it all the time, which is no good really. You can see where there's interest and lack of interest through the model. But it's done now, because here we are. So hopefully I'll go back to the first one I started and get that one finished off. I don't like unfinished models lying around. After a couple of weeks, if they're not finished, they'll go in the bin. But if I get that one finished, that'll be the last of the vintage kits that I do for the foreseeable future. I want to get on with something a bit more modern, production wise. Now the 52, I built that because I had it to hand. If I didn't have that, I'd have bought the Heller mouldings. They're far better than the Airfix ones. A lot more detail, a lot more refinement. So if you want to build a JU52, go for either the Heller kit or the Italieri kit, because they're the same mouldings, he says full of confidence. So enough of this jibber jabber. Let's see what I did with this kit. So we get two schemes. The instructions left me scratching my head a few times. The decals. Some nice props. Now the top of the floats look a bit odd to me. Perhaps a bit too square maybe? Some lovely pin marks to fill in. The transparent parts are very crude, very thick. So I've done what I usually do. I've cleaned up all the parts, which didn't take very long. I wasn't going to waste time on the kit's figures. They're far too long in the tooth. So I'm going to make a start on the engine cowls. And you can see here how these attach to the fairing on the wing. First thing I'm going to do is to remove this fixing point. Now this will leave me having to come up with another alternative way of fixing this to the fairing on the wing. So with the bulk of the plastic gone, I can tidy up the rest of the area with a bit more precision. Looking at references, I noticed on the cowls on the outboard side there was two exhaust ports. I'll roughly mark off where I'm going to drill the two holes out. So I'm just using a pin here just to create a hole for my drill bit to grab. Now for the exhaust stacks, I've used the plastic from this plastic covered rod. So those bits of plastic will go into the holes, something like this, you get the idea. I will leave them off for now for ease of painting, and we'll decide how I will attach these later on down the build. So I'm just going to help this kit's transparent part by dipping it into some Johnson's Pledge. I'll do the same for the gunner's transparent part as well, but the side windows I won't bother with, they're not too bad. So I'm going to fill in those dreaded pinholes underneath the wing. There's quite a few of them. Now if you've got a die cutter for circles, cut out the bits of plastic and place them in. Far easier. But I don't have that luxury. This is a bit more time consuming and laborious because you don't want to be filling up the hole completely. Do it gradually. Let the paint dry. With the paint thoroughly dry, I'm just sanding it to shape now. So I'm going to assemble the wings. I've added the landing lights on either wing, and I've also painted certain areas black. This is just to stop, when viewed underneath, the colour of the plastic showing through. The assembly of the cockpit. No point going overboard here, you're not going to see a great deal. A couple of brace plates where the gunner sits to add. Now for the engine, it's fairly basic. Couple of parts, that's all it is. Assemble these and then I'm going to give them a base coat of black. Once that's thoroughly dry, I'm going to pick out the detail by dry brushing with this aluminium. Then once that's thoroughly dried, I'm using Citadel paints just to pick out that shroud. The last thing I'm going to do is add a Tamiya panel wash. Now for the props, and thankfully Airfix have done a good job with these. Seem to have caught the shape pretty well. So I'm going to paint the interior dark grey. I want that contrast to show through the transparent parts. So the window's clamped in position. I'm adding a bit of glue, making sure that glue goes nowhere near those clamps. So now that I've added the cockpit assembly, I can start to assemble the fuselage. First the two side halves. Once these parts are dried, then I can add the lower and the upper part of the fuselage. The lower part fitted very nice. For a kit this age, it was a very good fit. For the upper half, I had to add a shim at the rear here. Other than that, a pretty good fit, thankfully. With the glue all set now on the fuselage, I'm adding the canopy now. Not a bad fit, but it did take a bit of dry fitting before it got to seat properly. So I've masked the canopy off, and with a particularly JU52 I'm doing, I had to add a few more frames to the canopy. The two on the top were rotated 90 degrees, and there was a couple of extra frames either side of the canopy. Needed adding. The wings for the fuselage are not the best of fits. So once I've got it in the right position, I've taped it up and then let it set before I do the other side. Add in the tail planes and then the tail. The struts I've replaced with some plastic rod. The kit parts were just far too thick. Now I was adding the rear ailerons to the wing, which come in two parts, and I noticed that the outer one was too short. As you can see, there's quite a gap there, a couple of mil. So I've had a bit of plastic card, let that glue set, and then I'll trim and sand it to shape. There, that looks better. Then the two-piece undercarriage either side. Looking at the pictorial reference of this particular Ju-52, there are a couple of parts on the kit that I didn't need, or I think I didn't need. So with that in mind, I've just filled the holes with some plastic card. So with most of the model finished now, I've given it a base coat of Tamiya matte white to spot for any imperfections, which is crucial with this type of horrible grey metallic plastic that Airfix used to supply. So with all the blemishes sorted out, I'm going to add the first colour, which is yellow. But before I do that, and to help that colour out, I'm going to make sure those areas are a solid white. And for the yellow, I'm just going to add a hint of red. This will just give me a warmer yellow. Now for the second colour, the undersides. I'm going to create a greyish blue. Main colour is going to be white, with a couple of drops of grey and a couple of drops of a custom blue I've made. But before I apply that custom blue mix, I'm just going to try something out. I'm going to use a very dark grey and apply it all over the lower surface in a stippling motion. Hopefully the grey will show through, so it just breaks up that blue colour over the top when I apply it. So with that dark grey stipple all dry, I'm applying my custom blue mix. So I can control the intensity of that stippled grey by the amount of light layers I apply over the top of it. Now if this works, I should be using the same technique for the upper surface colours. So now it's all dry, I'm quite happy how it's turned out. One thing I should have done was cover that yellow overspray. So with that light blue dry, I've masked off, ready for the upper surfaces. So I'm just getting rid of that overspray here. So my first colour on the top surface is going to be a natural metal. But I don't want to just paint silver. I think that'd be too obvious. So for the metallic areas, I'm going to apply a dark grey again. Stipple that paint over those areas and only those areas. And then using similar colours that I created for the underneath, except this time I'm adding a lot more white. And then once again, I'm applying that mix over the top of the stippled areas. So with those layers dry, I'm going to mask this area off, but I will be coming back to it. I've not finished with it yet. So with the off-white masked off, I can apply the two greens. I'm going to use a dark grey again, and then I'll apply the light green. Once I'm happy with the amount of that stippling effect showing through the light green, I'll let it dry, then I'll mask that off. So with the light green masked off, I'm just going to go over the stippling areas again with a darker grey. Mainly because that dark green is going to be quite powerful and it may obliterate the stippling effect underneath. So with all the main colours applied and thoroughly dried, all the demasking can begin. And as usual, there'll be retouches here and there, especially on these rear struts. So the last thing I want to do before I apply a coat of varnish to seal everything in is to mask off all the green edges. And then using this stuff, apply to a brush, and as you can see here, I'm wiping all the excess off. There's hardly anything left on the brush. And then I'm just literally going to dry brush this stuff on the surface. And hopefully the effect will be subtle enough to give me a slight glint, but not a pure silver. So I think I'm happy with the effect I've got. I've got that mottled off grey colour underneath with a slight metallic burnished look on top. It's just better, I think, than a slab of silver. So now that I'm happy with that, I'm going to seal everything in with a coat of gloss varnish. And then the next stage is to add the markings. Now for the markings, I'm going to have to create some of my own. For the emblem of this 52, I managed to find a good copy, scanned it in, cleaned it up and then reduced it to size. The code letters, I'm using this typeface, and then I'm converting the typeface into paths so I can manipulate it to get it as near as possible to the actual illustration that I'm looking at. Once I'm happy with that, I shall print it out, cut it out and place it against the size of the kit, just to make sure I've got the proportions right. If I'm happy with that, I shall print out the emblems on some transparent decal paper and then seal them all in with a gloss varnish. But the code letters, I'm going to have to create some stencils. There's no way a decal of that size, a homemade one anyway, is going to go over that corrugated surface. So while the varnish is drying on those emblems, I'm going to use the same artwork to create a mask so I can paint the white background of the emblem. Now next, I've got the laborious task of creating the code letters or making a mask for those code letters. I might get away with just making one mask, I might have to make two. So it's just a matter of being very patient here and taking my time. So now that I'm reasonably happy that that mask is embedded in the surface, I'm going to apply an off black colour to the code letters. I don't want a pure black, it'd be too stark. So of course, a bit of retouching here and there, but it ain't bad, it'll do. Now thankfully, I've managed to source some decals from what I had lying around. Now of course, they all come from different manufacturers, so I'm going to be using various decal solutions to help settle them down on that surface. Now of course, I had a couple of decals that didn't want to play. These were the crosses underneath the wing. Perfect style, perfect size. But as soon as I added water to them, they disintegrated, all cracked up. So I ended up using some very spurious small crosses underneath. There was no way I was going to start creating masks for crosses on this surface. And one technique I use for the decals to seat properly is after I'd applied a softener, let it go off for a minute, and then using a bit of a polythene bag placed over the surface, and either use a toothpick or a toothbrush, just going over the top gently. This way I'm applying the pressure, but I'm not disturbing the decal underneath. This doesn't always work, but most of the time it does. This way I get that decal embedded in that surface. So the last thing I'm going to do now is add some mud stains and some smoke stains using oils. A couple of exhaust stains over the wing, using lamp black, once again tiny amount, and just blend it in with a brush. I may have messed up here and I've added 2 stains when there should only been 1. I don't know, it looks nice. So I'm going to assemble the cowl to the engine. It's quite a nice fit here, 2 slots at the top, 1 slot at the bottom. Then those exhaust stacks, fed them through the holes, and I'm just going to use a bit of PVA glue just to give me a bit of time to position them and get them right. And then once that PVA glue is set, I'll use a couple of drops of super glue just to set it in place properly. The exhaust stacks on the front engine, okay, with a series of holes on the engine block. Once again, a nice fit. So all the ancillary parts are painted and finished. All that's left to finish this kit off is to add them. Now the fitment of the outer engines to the actual fairing on the wing, because I cut that face off, I've got nothing now to attach it to these 2 points. So I'm using some plasticard, a tube, and then a couple of shims cut out, and build them up and then keep test fitting, see where I can get the right position. Once I have, glue it all in place and then trim it down. So there we are, nearly done. For such a simple kit, it's taken me ages. I've just got to add the props and the stand, and then I'll take a few pictures. Now, like most kits of this era, it doesn't bear close scrutiny around the gun area, the engines, the wheels, or the cockpit. It's all about the overall effect. If you want to super detail this kit, you'd throw most of the bits away. But that's not what this is about. So I hope you've enjoyed the video. I want to thank you for watching, and I do hope to see you for the next video.